Ready to move to the next level in your product career? I'm Shobhit from Intentional Product Manager. Join me as we discuss ways to help you stand out in your job search and your career so you can have more impact and make more money. So, with me is Kanad Das, who has been a group product manager at Google and currently working on his stealth startup. So, please welcome, Kanad. Welcome to this podcast.
Hey, thanks, Shobhit, for having me.
Awesome. So, for our audience, they want to get to know you a little bit. So, just tell us a bit about your career path so far.
Yeah, so I started off as an engineer doing
Mhm.
software development, and then I moved on to product management. My transition to product management was I really liked uh, going in front of customers and evangelizing what we are building.
Cool.
And for the first time, I got exposure on how decisions are made on what we build and why we build, right? And that was the transition. And then eventually, I was at a startup at that time, and then I moved on to Microsoft, where I was introduced to the world of search, and I was kind of enamored with the internet scale, getting to do work that touched 300, 400 million people, people's lives, right, simultaneously with the work that you do. And then, of course, when we were at Bing, we were chasing the taillights of Google, and then I moved to Google. And then get exposed to true internet scale, because now you're talking billions of users that you can
Yeah.
touch, right? And then there is a method to the madness that Google has mastered in some sense. And that also forces you to be very disciplined, thoughtful about how you approach problems and why you want to solve that problem. And, good balance of outcome driven innovation and a good amount of satisfaction. Uh,
Mm.
right. So, which I think is a pretty good feeling at the end of the day
Yeah.
once you get through that process and journey.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah,
So,
and then
this,
after that, sorry,
yeah.
you
No, no,
know,
please go on.
AI happened, and then I have been wanting to dabble my hands into AI, and uh, old habits of being a technical guy die hard. And I think the tools that are out there today actually make a PM's life a lot more empowered, is what I would say. You
Mm.
can quickly prototype stuff, your ideas that you have, right? A little bit of getting out of your comfort zone, wanting to code. For me, it has always been that I cannot start coding from scratch, but if I get a piece of code, I think I can work with it. And that's what is happening today, right? With the bunch of
Yeah.
tools out there. So
Yeah.
that's very empowering.
I might come back to this later because this is a very interesting topic right now and obviously top of people's minds. Um, I used to joke that I can code anything you want. I just can't debug anything. I can't solve bug. So that used to be my go-to line. Um, but okay, let's go back. So you mentioned, you were at Microsoft. Did you come into Google as a group PM? Is that, or like, did you like come in? What are the paths to that
Yeah, I came into Google at as Group PM.
as group P? Got it.
Yes, interviewed and got in as Group PM.
Perfect. So let's talk about more from a perspective of, I'm in this episode, we're trying to demystify this role.
Right.
So when you came in, like what was your team charter? They both direct team as well as cross-functional peers and whatnot, just
Right.
trying to understand what it looked like. And then how did
Right.
it evolve over time?
Yeah. So when I joined as a IC,
Mhm.
right? And I was hesitant a little bit because I had been a PM manager leader
Mm.
for some time at Bing. But I think the opportunity to actually have such a huge and wide impact
Mm,
was one thing that was really crucial for me, right? So, uh, and both level wise as well as salary wise, it wasn't a down level as such. Salary bump was there.
mm,
The opportunity to have an impact was also higher. So from that perspective, it was great. But yes, you are not leading another set of PMs as such, right? But that
yeah.
was like for like 6 months initially. Uh, so when I joined, I actually joined the enterprise search group. This
Oh,
is
okay.
this was
Mm,
called Cloud Search, part of the workspace team. And then, I kind of worked through uh, account management team, sales team, and that was the time when the COVID shutdown was happening. So I actually wanted to meet customers. The good part about the COVID shutdown was that they didn't expect me to fly out there anymore.
mm.
So I was able to meet almost like my run rate was like 10 customers a week.
10.
Yes. So I
Remarkable. Oh.
reached out to the account management team as well as the resellers, and they were just very happy to introduce me and get me that starting half an hour meeting.
Mm,
And I think what I learned from that was eye opening in
mm,
terms of what we were doing right and what we were not doing so right. And then I was able to come up with a set of things. So initially, that basically seeded my backlog in some sense. It's a bad word in
mm.
the PM world because it feels like you're going after a bunch of features. But these are problem areas
Yeah.
for your customers. And then, so I think that was one of the best things that I did in hindsight. Like talk to so many customers at a very fast pace to formulate my thought about what I should be doing. And then after that, it is coming up with a proposal, working with your other PM peers, your leadership, engineering peers, and engineering leadership to come forth with a plan, right? What you should and shouldn't do. And then we ended up. So the funny part was there were a lot of people who wanted to sunset that product,
Mm,
uh, and then there was competitive pressure from Microsoft because they had started to work on Bing at Work. They were making moves of integrating into the browser at that time. So Chrome Enterprise did want to work with us and make it part of Chrome Enterprise, right? But that was not the primary focus for Workspace. The money was coming in from selling into SMBs and
mm,
the productivity tools, right? But then what happened is that uh, I worked on one really big account, huge account. Like if I tell the name, it's like it'll pop out, right? So,
mm,
and we won that. And that was a proof point for one of my strategy that I put
mm.
forth, right? But it is still one, right? I mean, at Google scale, if you are not if you do not have a line of sight into $1 billion, it doesn't mean a lot, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So even that one big customer doesn't really mean a lot. So working through uh, the business process to actually make certain changes into how you want the pricing to happen and all that stuff was very arduous, but I learned some of my key lessons working with the BPO process manager and the finance folks over there. Uh, and the lesson for me was in when you are with such a huge group, like big sales teams, your execs in there, right? What it takes to hold your ground when everybody is against what you are proposing, right? And I got mentoring from the most unexpected part. The BPO manager, the business process manager, actually, she helped me understand who will actually be able to help me with whatever I wanted to achieve. Right. So I think so. Short of it, I think at Google there are brilliant people in every nook and corner.
Hmm.
Uh, if you know to reach out, you will get help. Right. And I think that was one of the. Uh, I mean that aspect really enamored me. Being a tech guy, being PM, I actually got help from finance team and
Hmm.
somebody who was doing business process automation.
Uh,
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 yeah,
that
I
that's
think
true.
it happens in only orgs like Google, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like we sometimes talk about, okay, here's the organizational chart, but here's the actual influence chart. And
yeah,
sometimes you have to look like beyond the obvious. Okay, this is the person who's going to do everything for me, beyond the obvious
yeah,
manager or skip level manager and whatnot,
yeah.
which is what you did. Awesome. So then, did you switch teams over you were mentioning, or what happened after?
Yes. So a year into enterprise search, I switched over to core search,
Okay, got
which
it.
is what I was doing at Bing. So
Yeah.
I moved over to core search, and I spent almost close to 2 years, a little less than 2 years, working on search answers. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, so I mean, I worked on search answers for 18 months plus, right? And then a
And
lot of things changed around me,
but
right?
but before you go on,
Sure.
tell people what search answers is because they might not be aware what it is.
Oh, yeah. Search answers is essentially you ask Google on the URL bar a question and Google gives you an answer, right?
Right.
And making it a little bit more nuanced. It could be like factual answers, what's the height of LeBron James? Who's Zenda's boyfriend.
Hmm.
So they're facts. But you could also ask questions like, why is the sky blue? How do I get more likes on my TikTok
Hmm.
channel? There are no factual answers for that. But I mean, there might be a factual answer, but more exploratory oriented, right? So
Sure.
that gets you into whether you go access a knowledge graph, which is more deterministic, or you dip into your web relevance stack uh, to get an answer from one of the trillion documents out there, and then you find out the right snippet, and boom, your answer comes out, right? So
Hmm.
what we are seeing today, like Perplexity is doing, which is more abstractive summarization, right? You extract out answers from multiple documents and then you generate answer for it, right? Google was doing that since 2016, not across multiple documents, but across from the one best document, right? And
Hmm.
that's extractive summarization that Google. So exposure to tech at scale and what can be achieved, I think, is mind-boggling uh, in the search world.
Love it. Yeah. Awesome. So then you mentioned you then things changed around you. What was
Oh,
happening?
yeah. I think my role with answers remained, and my managers, engineering teams that would work on it kept on changing. I think like 4 times it
Wow.
changed. Right. So the engineering team changed 2 times, but my manager and the org in which I was located changed. So Google was going through a transition in terms of org at that time. So the good part was that my role wasn't really changed.
Yeah.
So I was able to focus on the work that I have to do.
Got it. And this is the time you also mentioned earlier that hey, you had you were IC. Now you started to build out your team, or like what happened around that?
Yes. So I started to build out the team. The answers org had two PMs in there, so I inherited a team essentially, and then Google has got this fantastic APM program.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
for us managers, most managers, first thing that goes on is, oh yeah, great free resource, right?
Yeah.
And you get a really very well motivated, smart guy who wants to
Yeah,
work and chew through anything that you throw at them. Uh,
yeah,
so it's a fantastic program, right? I think for the people who are in it and also for the orgs who get
yeah.
APMs. And there is a great method to, you actually have to sell your problem space to the APMs, right? And
Oh,
then
wow.
somebody, you're hoping that somebody is going to choose and is able to, relate to the problem space that you are working on and wants to work on it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it's a great program for people starting out their career,
Yeah.
in product especially. Um, okay, so since we are trying to demystify this role,
Hmm.
right? Like, what is Group PM? Like, tell me first. Let's take you as an IC. Um, how would that Group PM role differ from, let's say, somebody who joins post MBA, maybe at a L4? Like, what has changed?
So I think in Google that I've seen is that uh, with levels, complexity of problem changes.
Mm,
It is not necessary that the scope of impact drastically changes. It's not necessarily that. It's the complexity of the problem that you handle changes, right? And the complexity can be thought of in many ways. There is inherent ambiguity in the problem definition itself.
hmm
There can be organizational ambiguity involved. There can be other types of ambiguity involved, like you are working with really challenging teams. Uh, the problem ambiguity may not be as much. The organizational ambiguity may be there, but now you are dealing with, Google has 2 decades of tech stack, right? And sometimes the tech stack requires transformation. And then every line of code that you touch in Google is probably impacting a million users.
Yeah.
Just throwing out some sort of a semblance of a number over there, right? So it makes life not that easy. So, and by what I mean by that is that you have to be very thoughtful. Uh, so you have to really dig deep, right? You have to be able to hypothesize what the changes that you are proposing will show up in terms of outcome, right? And along the line, what are the indicators that says that you will likely reach or deliver that outcome, right?
Mm,
So when the complexity increases, you are looking at hypothesizing for all these small problems, figuring out the outcomes, figuring out the indicators that you will actually reach the outcomes, right? So that requires quite, and everything has to be data driven, right?
hmm
Not just in Google you're sitting on primary data. You are not, you don't need to look at secondary data. You
hmm
ask for the log, you have the log,
hmm
right? The world's log is right there.
hmm
So um, you need to know how to look through, sift through the log, visualize those changes, and then articulate them. And then, you have to bring people together. Everybody has to be convinced. Every team has something or the other. So, right there, the challenges around dealing with pulling out insights,
Yeah.
being data driven, bringing teams together, so when you are at a level 7, like I almost dealt with 7 to 8 different teams. If you are a IC level 4 PM, you will be working with, let's say, 2, 3 teams, and the level of complexity of the data insights that are needed are way different, right?
Yep.
So when I worked at the problem that I worked on, I'm looking at users' behavior on iOS devices, right? A level 4 guy would probably look at for a sliver on, let's say, Android
hmm
devices.
And this is very helpful discussion because, like, one of the not just challenges, just like hesitations I do see in PMs who've managed other PMs is, oh, if I go back to IC, I'm like being down leveled and this is what's happening.
Mm.
And sometimes actually being an IC could be an awesome thing as long as the level of ambiguity, as you decide, the scope is big enough. It could be just as impactful, just as good in terms of compensation. All those things can still work out for you. Then you might build teams as well if the scope desires. So,
Yeah, no, I think Google expects you. I mean, directors open up those tools,
mhm.
and not directors, VPs open up those tools. There is like session browsers. They will go into the session and see, okay, what query did you execute? Let me
Mm,
check that. They will visualize it themselves. Yes, in fact, yeah, this is great what you are saying, or no, take a look at this. This is also happening. So uh, you are expected to be hands on, pull up your sleeves and get
yeah,
into the weeds. Yeah, I mean, not level 7, level 8, level 9, everybody gets
yeah,
into the weeds, right? So,
totally.
I mean, I think one has to appreciate what is at stake for Google if they don't do that.
Mm,
I
similar.
mean, on one query, you have millions of users.
Mm,
On one query, you have millions of users on a daily basis. So, I mean, you cannot not do something like that. So, yeah, so the ask of people is very much be hands on, be very technical, be able to understand how each of these changes will actually affect or impact users. So,
yeah,
analytics becomes very critical. Uh, Being able to work through metrics, being able to work through measurements, translating user behavior into what you should measure becomes
yeah.
very.
Okay. I love that. Now, if I may ask, uh, I'm going into a little bit of a tangent, but you mentioned something, so I wanna dig deeper into it. You said be technical. So help me help demystify that for me by like maybe unbundling it a little bit more. Somebody coming into Google at that level, do they need to be an engineer? If not, like what are the kind of skills they should possess? Like just one more level of breakdown would be helpful.
So, firstly, you don't have to be an engineer,
Hmm.
right? Uh, that I had studied computer science is just incident,
Hmm.
right? But I didn't study everything that I learned and picked up at Google. Google
Hmm.
has its own set of tools. You have to learn those tools, right? I think there is training available for it. There is, you're given sufficient time.
Yeah.
You just have to learn it, right? Initially, I also went through this whole thing. Oh man, I have to learn this. And then you immediately get over that hump once you actually do it and you start seeing what you get out of it, right?
Yeah.
You have never visualized user sessions the way you can visualize yours. So being technical in the sense that there are tools, you have to be open to learning those tools and
Hmm.
utilizing those tools, right? And when you use those tools, yeah, you have to probably write some SQL queries as well. So it's not like you have to learn how to code in Python and R and understand the intricacies of knowledge graphs and document. Yeah, none of that
Yeah.
is right. If you do understand that, it's very good because there is something called as you featureize in the AI ML world.
Hmm.
You can then featureize better. So I think this is something that you learn on the job. The most important thing to understand is not have any hangups that
Hmm.
this is my world and this is not my world,
Yeah.
right? Everything is my world if I can have the right impact and the right outcome.
Yeah.
uh, Important thing is, do not just work through it and think through what is important yourself. You will have a lot of help.
Yeah.
Get the right help and get the right mentorship.
Yeah.
uh, and I think be open to adapting yourself.
Love it. Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, recently on the podcast we had Ravi Mehta, who's been CPO at Tinder, as a guest. And now he's working on a new idea. And he was like, cool, I'm coding. My Figma skills are now better off than they used to be. And just like, have jumped right in because that's what's required right now. And there's no like, oh no, I manage people. I don't do this sort of
Mm.
stuff. And I think one needs that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the what AI has done, I find it very liberating. There used to be times when we have to wait, and there is like genuine team needs that, the engineers have to work on certain things, right? Because you are also waiting for the
Yeah.
outcome of that, right? But you still feel like handicapped. Oh man, if I could try out something right away.
Mm.
Today, you can try out something right away. The only thing that is stopping you is your own willingness to try out.
Yep.
I think that helps. I'm absolutely this thing that your willingness to try out and be technical when needed is very helpful for yourself in your own career. So,
Love it. So, if I may ask one more question about the technical part, and I was going to come to it, but you mentioned AI. If somebody is, cool, I'm a good product manager, I haven't been necessarily working with AI much, what would be like the top two, three things you ask them to pick up or understand or just work through to set themselves up for success?
I think there is so many free resources out there. I
Yeah.
think YouTube is truly like not one university, like there are like hundreds of universities out there, right? But it
Yeah.
is very important to cut through this thing and really pick out things that are going to be helpful, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is a little bit of structure needed in understanding that. So definitely uh, there are known people, top voices who are publishing things.
Yeah.
And I think I have found that Maven also has very good resources. So, if you followed the right set of people in the PM world,
Hmm.
there is no way that you are not getting this advice
Yeah.
that go learn certain things, certain
Yeah.
courses. I don't want to name this thing courses, but
Yeah.
for sure, if you're following the right set of people, you follow Lenny, you follow Ben
Perfect.
Strategy, you follow all this,
Yeah.
you cannot miss that, right? If you're missing that, man, I think you have to do
Yeah.
something even more before that. So I think you know, understanding, reading those content does help.
Yeah.
uh, right, you do not have to go after certifications, but reading and understanding, then just do it, right? I mean, uh, Claude, combination of Claude and Cursor is just amazing.
Claude and Cursor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, Somebody was also telling me, GPT, Chat GPT, and Replit. I have not tried it, but Claude and Cursor is just amazing. Then you have, other tools also that are out
Yeah.
there, but these are free to try, right? I mean, yeah.
And I think, I mean, first of all, I want to echo two things you said, very important. One is uh, every product manager should be subscribed to, in my opinion, Lenny's newsletter and Stratechery by Ben Thompson, who's a business school classmate of mine. Just like absolutely one, and it's $15 a month, so $30 a month, $300 a year. Hey, it's just so totally worth it. And then, like the second point here is that you don't have to go and learn how to build a LLM. It's first like you become an amazing user of what AI is providing,
Mhm.
and that gets you like deeper and deeper. But that's the right place to begin, right? Like, am I saying the right
Uh,
thing? Does that make
No,
sense?
no, so you're absolutely right. I think it is important to know the use of technology and their
Yeah,
limits, or what is the cost of it, right?
yeah,
And then, even better, use the tools because it is there for us to use. And you get a hands-on feel of. So if your customers are developers,
yeah,
might as well try it, right? And if your customers are going to be using the similar tools, you have the opportunity to try it yourself. So in some sense, you are dog fooding before you even
I
So,
I agree. Be as technical as your end users. That's important. Excellent. Okay. One last question for you, Kanad. So let's say somebody is now going to interview at Google for L7, or just like thinking about going at that level. What are like experiences they should possess? Like what advice would you give them?
yeah, so this is a great question, right? I think there is interview prep, a lot of interview prep around prep, I mean, interviewing at Google, interviewing at
Yep.
Facebook.
Hmm.
But I think one thing critical is that those prep is not just prep, right? It helps to live some of those learnings in your work. That's when it becomes really ingrained, right? So uh, I've seen folks who want help with interview prep,
Hmm.
right? Uh, but the real question is, have you lived working that way, or are you like responding to interview questions in a certain way, right? Because when things get hard in an interview,
Hmm.
uh, it's not very hard for the interviewer to pull down the sham from front, and
Yeah.
then your real thing comes out. And at that time, when you're thinking through your experiences, if you have not really thought through it that way, right, it does not naturally come out that way. So I think living through your learnings is very important
Yeah.
at your present job, right? So
Hmm.
that part I would say is very important. The second part that I would say is, and I think what your group does very well, is really understand how to create narratives.
Hmm.
Uh, Even for the most technical of the work that you have done, the narrative behind it becomes extremely important.
Yeah.
The second part the other thing that I would say is that, when you are uh, coming up with your narratives, be as authentic as possible, because otherwise it shows.
Yep.
And that dissonance, even if the interviewer is unable to read through what is this happening, but they feel what is happening, something is not right, they feel the
Yeah.
dissonance, right? And that likability aspect then automatically just goes away. So being authentic becomes very important, so that you actually appear true, a person of integrity, and be likable to your interview, which goes well above and beyond that, how well you actually answer the question, right?
Yeah.
You have to appear likable, if not be likable, right? So that's
Yeah.
the other.
I'll just say tie back to some of the other things you were saying before, because you're by the way, side story, like the only people who we've like really just like removed from our program is who came in and they were like, cool, this I wrote this story because this is how you told me how to write it. Like, wait, so you've not actually done this? We're like, cool, we can't do it. Sorry, this is not gonna work out. But to your point, you mentioned like ambiguity earlier on and the scope, like that needs to come out on the narrative, and it feels that's where like they people mispresenting I'm going to use your words. Uh, um, you said ambiguity and complexity of problem, and they don't bring it across.
Yes.
And I think that's the what you mentioned at the beginning. That's really the magic of the narrative is can you communicate the why this problem was so complex, why your solution was so special for it in the work that you did.
Yes. No, so I think that part, right? I have struggled with it. I know that I have struggled with it. I have worked on really complex and very ambiguous problem. But then when I am talking about it, right? I mean, I talk in paragraphs, and I can talk, so I feel so great about talking about what I have
I
done.
know, yeah.
It is so natural, but that's not effective, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that same ambiguous and complex problem, if I can land it in 1 to max 2 sentences, uh, I think that's the most critical part. So, knowing what you built, why you built it, now what and so what, is very important. And that's all that is really needed to be said. And for the person who has worked through it, they feel, I mean, I have been there, right? I feel that my whole journey is the most important thing, and let me walk the person through my journey, right? I mean, otherwise they are missing out on how awesome I am, or what is the crux of that I bring to the table, right? But that's not what they're looking for. And I think it is very hard to mentally move out of that space and really focus on just that small bit, right? That really lands the message. And it's not easy. I can say it's not easy at all.
I agree. I think as my co-founder Sam says, like, behavioral interviews are difficult, are really hard, and the problem is people think they're easy because they're just telling them this is what I did. Cool. And then product design, everyone's like is like, oh, that's difficult. But I don't believe so.
Yeah.
Awesome. Kanad, if people want to connect with you, how should they connect? LinkedIn or?
LinkedIn is the best way. I am always available on LinkedIn, and I think my contact details are also there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, for telling people all about this role. And then also we covered other topics like AI, ML, and how technical you need to be and whatnot. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, Shobhit. Thanks a bunch.
Hey, be sure to check out our website at intentionalproductmanager.com to see how you can level up in your career.